Wyoming, the Fremont County Republican Party, the Republican Women of Fremont County PAC, and the Fremont County Democratic Party. I welcome you to this evening's candidate forum for Wyoming State House District 54 and 55. I'm Linda Martin. I'm the chair of the League of Women Voters of Fremont County. We are pleased to host 9 candidate forums during the 2024 election season. Our final primary election forum is the Lander City Council, Ward 1, and will be held on August 15th at 6 p.m. right here at the Lander Library. We are gratified for the support of our partner organizations, especially Scott Harnsberger, Tara Berg. Hi, Tara. Can you guys stand up for a minute? These guys are Julie Twist. I'm not sure if she's here. But we have had a delightful relationship. We've worked really well together, and I'm pleased and gratified for that. The League of Women Voters of Fremont County is a nonpartisan grassroots organization that is part of the State and National League of Women Voters. The League believes voters should play a critical role in democracy and encourage informed and active government participation. The League is dedicated to voter education, voter rights, and providing information that helps voters make informed decisions at the polls. The League does not support or endorse any candidate running for office. The League distributes unbiased candidate information through our digital primary election voter guide and general election voter guide, which is mailed to over 19,000 households in Fremont County. Our Be a Voter guide informs the citizens of Fremont County how to register, request an absentee ballot, and other need-to-know voter information. Please consider adding your name to our listserv on the sign-up sheet at our information table. Visit our Facebook page or website at www.lwv10.org for information about our local elections, our voter guide, which is, by the way, now in Spanish as well, and other candidate forums. Tonight's forum is being live streamed by County 10 and will be available online post-forum at County 10, YouTube, and Facebook, and through our own website. We want to thank our county clerk, Julie Fries, and the excellent county election office staff for providing guidance and information over the past few months in registering voters. Thank you to Maggie Miller for moderating this forum, and County 10 for hosting our forum videos and providing the sound system. Actually, we want to thank the library for our sound system this evening. Of course, we want to thank the candidates for running for elective office. It is our commitment of time, of time, energy, and emotional and mental strength. We welcome these candidates and wish them well on their campaigns. With that, please welcome our moderator for tonight's forum, Maggie Miller, who will introduce the guidelines and begin tonight's events. Thank you so much.
I too would like to welcome you to this forum. My name is Maggie Miller, and I am an attorney here in Fremont County. Work as a children's advocate, as a guardian ad litem. I have 2 daughters who live in Fremont County, one of whom is going to medical school through the WWAMI program. Some of you might be familiar with the collaboration between the state of Wyoming and the University of Washington School of Medicine in Seattle. The other one, lucky girl, she's up working out of Dickinson Park for the Allen Brothers for 5 months as a wrangler. I think we should all be up there instead of here. I'm honored to be the moderator of this forum for you tonight. I really genuinely believe that democracy is founded on our right and our responsibility to vote. And so we're here tonight to offer you the opportunity to educate yourselves about the choices you'll have on your ballots. And it's our goal to give the candidates time to share their thoughts and ideas with all of you. Tonight's forum is with the candidates running for the Wyoming State House Districts 54 and 55. Representative Lloyd Larson currently represents 54 and is being challenged by Tina Clifford, Member Oakley currently represents 55 and is being challenged by Joel Guggenhaus. The way the evening's going to work is we'll have an opening statement from each candidate, and we'll start with Member, so you get your thoughts in line. 2 minutes per side. And because they're actually not debating each other, there won't be any rebuttals this evening. And so in that regard, it's different than a debate. There will be 13 questions, and each candidate will have a minute and a half, nothing like a hard question in 90 seconds. And when the speaker has 15 seconds remaining, Abby will raise an orange paddle so that you know to wrap it up. We're not going to be super tight once you finish your sentence, but it would be nice to stay with the timelines. I will also ask you if you want to address any known differences between your answer and your opponent's stance. If you choose to address differences, you'll have 30 seconds. We will alternate leads for each question, and we, again, appreciate people respecting the time limit. The next section of the forum is going to be audience questions. This whole group that Linda Barton alluded to created a whole bunch of questions, but we're interested if there's anything we've passed over that you'd like to hear about. And there's index cards that are being circulated from the back. They'll come around, and if you'd like, write down a question. After the 5th round of questions, the index cards will be collected, and the team will go through and pick a few that might be good for this evening. And finally, each candidate's going to be given an opportunity to make a closing statement for a minute. We're confident that some of the things you hear tonight you'll agree with, and maybe other things not so much, but we'd appreciate it if people could withhold comment until the end. It's your turn.
Everybody hear me? Good evening. I'm Member Oakley. I'm running for my 3rd term in the Wyoming House, running for re-election. I currently represent House District 55, which is Riverton. I am a proud, multi-generational Fremont County and Wyoming Republican. And I'll tell you why I believe that matters now more than ever. Which, as an old school Wyoming Republican, I believe that I represent long-held, even traditional Wyoming values. I was raised with a live and let live form of conservatism that I believe has served as the heart of Wyoming for generations. I'm also part of the Fremont County Republican Women and a precinct committee woman in the Fremont County Republican Party. When we go to Cheyenne, we have real work to do in the legislature. All appropriations that fund the state of Wyoming originate in the Wyoming House. So we have a duty to do that and to focus on that. And I will continue to focus on legislation that addresses real issues that are facing Wyoming. I currently serve on 5 committees. I'm the vice chairman of revenue. We dealt with property tax issues, which is certainly at the forefront of everybody's mind and conversations. We passed a 4% cap on year-over-year increases in property taxes, long-term homeowners exemption, as well as some others. We will continue to work on those issues in a thoughtful way, a strategic way, and a comprehensive way, because it is a complex issue. Oh wow, running out of time already. I'm also the chairman of Tribal Relations. I serve on the Judiciary Committee. I'm a prosecutor in my day job, and I'm on 2 others. So with that, I have enjoyed serving Riverton and being in the Wyoming House, and I look forward to continued service and would ask for your support in the primary on August 20th.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you. I too am really appreciative of the opportunity to be here tonight, to be in front of the public. I think that this is just a critical component of our system of government, where we come before you and explain to you why we believe what we believe and our thoughts and ideas on how to move stuff forward for the benefit of the citizens of the state. I think I'd really be remiss if I didn't just publicly tell Scott Harsberger, who is the chairman of our Fremont County Republican Party, what an incredible active leadership he's had in this whole election process this year that we've not seen for many years, because he sent all of us, me included, probably Emma, a letter that says that it's our responsibility to allow the people of the county and the state to hear in this type of a format the differences or the similarity between the candidates. And so, Scott, thank you very, very much for showing the leadership, because I know that wasn't received with the same enthusiasm as I'm expressing across the board. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Lloyd Larson. My wife Becky and I will be married 45. We've been married a long time. In a couple of weeks, we're the parents of 6 children. 2 still live in the state, and those 2 just blessed us with increase the population of our state and give us our 20th and 21st grandchild, which she keeps track of that sort of stuff. My career was 35 years in oil and gas. We served in the community, tried to do the things that we need to do to make Wyoming better. I believe I've always held to conservative values and look forward to this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Lloyd. And you must have been reading over my shoulder. First question goes to you. What are your thoughts about your opponent not attending tonight's forum? You have 90 seconds.
Well, I think it's whether with a business partner, whether it's with your children, or whether it's with an opponent political race, you have a perspective on what you think would be the best outcome. That doesn't mean I'm always right, okay? But for me, to participate in this just really gives me an opportunity to answer questions that I think people want to hear. I don't know why she feels differently about that. We've had, this will be our 4th forum. The first 2 are by Republican women. She elected not to participate in either one of those. She did want to participate in one held by a different Republican Party women's group, and I welcome that, and I too participated in that because I think we should. And then she elected not to participate in this. I just think that I think it's not as much unfortunate for her as it's unfortunate for you that are here, because you don't have the opportunity to really, you're going to hear what I have to say, but there's silence here, so I just would say it's unfortunate.
What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Maggie. So, I can't tell you how struck, and I'll just say it very bluntly, appalled I was by the answer that was given by the group of 6 people that are aligned with the Freedom Caucus or members of the Freedom Caucus, when they said they wouldn't do debates because they weren't, the people that they believe putting on the forum were not aligned with their very conservative values. I am a Republican, and I will continue to vote along conservative lines when I'm elected, assuming that that's what the people want. But there is not one person that I represent that I will not have a discussion with, that I will not discuss policy, or anything that's the very heart of representative democracy. And I think it's the direction that takes to espouse that is just something I can't understand. And then I agree with Lloyd that what we're seeing with that refusal to have a discussion with the people takes away the voters' ability to understand. So that also is an angle that it attacks our representative democracy. So I go so far as to say I condemn their actions in not being here.
Thank you. So Amber, you can be first on this. the Wyoming Freedom Political Action Committee, and Make Liberty Win PAC has mailed information to voters about your voting record. Please refer to the mailers that are on the table there somewhere and address the specific information about your voting record if you'd like to.
Thank you for that. We're just digging in here. So, but I welcome the opportunity, and I will answer again questions to anybody. So I've had one that I call a hit piece come out against me in mailer that I will go so far to say sometimes they're misleading, but the information that was on the mailer that was sent out about me was false. It's verifiably false, which again I think is a very concerning direction. So the first thing that it said was that we as legislators voted to keep Trump off of the ballot, which this is why it's verifiably false, because that's not what state legislatures do. So civics lesson for everyone, in case you're wondering. But I mean that's very important, because I don't believe that was misleading. That is absolutely not what we voted on. And just to make it clear, if we did vote on that, I certainly would not support it. But that's false. Then it said that I and Lloyd voted against the 4% property tax, the 4% cap on property taxes that increase year over year. And that's especially confounding, because I was a co-sponsor of the bill. And I know that, I mean, since I'm going on too long here, I'll include Lloyd, I don't want to speak for him, but Lloyd and I are both co-sponsors of the bill. And then, as I've said, I'm the vice chairman of revenue, so then then we vetted the entire bill, we passed it out of my committee, I spoke on the floor, and then I voted for him. So to write that I voted no, again, they think they're referring to an amendment, but they said I voted no on a bill that I co-sponsored and I personally passed. So then there's some others that they said we voted against, for example, about Chinese land ownership, we voted against that bill and voted a different bill, Senate File 77. So the point being, at best it's misleading, but most of it is actually verifiably false. And again, I think we're really going in a bad direction with explaining things to voters when they're getting absolutely false information in the mail.
Thank you. And if you later need to look at the card, we have it somewhere.
Yeah, I know. There's 5 points, I know.
Lloyd's older, he needs it.
So I'll just kind of follow up. She's talking about the mailer that y'all received. It talks about us being needing to be retired. And so the property on foreign ownership is something that we're really concerned about in the state. But the bill that Senate File 120, in fact, I spent 4 hours on, because I'm on this critical infrastructure work group, to get that right. But it was going to redefine what a legal alien was, which required a constitutional amendment. So the bill without a constitutional amendment was unconstitutional. And then it also allowed the state to participate in takings, meaning that they would sell the assets of the foreign ownership and that they would keep the proceeds. And so it was just not set right to be law. Senate File 77 that we did pass was actually a different approach, and they're kind of companions. 77 has really proven to be a valuable resource to Homeland Security and the folks that have to enforce that right now with the federal government. We on the driver's license. So at the end of every budget session, or the end of every session, we're all worried that our bills are going to get hurt, and they just don't. There's just more bills than you have time to do, and so there's always your mad scramble to see where your bill can come up. You go try. You take cookies to the majority committee to persuade them to get your bill up, and sometimes they'll get assigned to a committee and not heard, and so there's a procedure that says you can ask for that bill to be reassigned. And that's what happened on that bill. But there were just other bills that were more important. And it didn't get enough votes to be moved into another committee, so it died. I've had to bring bills back a second year, third year, till I get them right. Today's mail with Lloyd on a diet talks about I support allowing men and women's sports, which we voted on that Senate file 2 years ago. Amber and I both supported restricting that, and we don't do it. It talks about, and the basis behind this, and really is just the House Bill 50, which is defining what a woman is, and that was killed on introduction, so it never made it to a committee for debate. The reason I voted for that is if you look at that, the structure of the bill had legislative findings, which you don't put in all bills, but within the legislative findings, it said that bill met the constitutional intermediate scrutiny, and I may have those two backwards, which I didn't know what that meant. Had to look it up. But that, when a judge is going to rule on a new law that could impact someone's civil rights, he can do that if it meets the greater good for government. But it has to meet this test. And so this language in there says, this meets the test for privacy, protection, and safety. Okay? Well, the judge right now can rule for those individually, for privacy, or for safety, or for protection. But the way they structured the bill, now the judge, it has to meet the criteria for all three. So, man going into a woman's locker room, it may meet the test for privacy and safety, but not for the other one. But it would have to meet all three. So the bill actually made it harder for the judge to do that. That's not something you learn in your first year.
Thank you, Lloyd. I suspect that's more than any of us even really understood. So I want to remind both of you that, because now we're going to move on towards more theme-based questions. If you know your opposing candidate's views on something, you have 30 seconds to explore that after your minute and a half. Okay? Lloyd, the homestead exemption law now includes a 50% exemption for homeowners who are older than 65 and have paid property taxes for 25 years. This exemption will create a significant revenue shortfall for counties and the state, which particularly impacts school funding in the first year. How should the revenue loss be replaced, and/or what services should be cut?
So the loss of revenue for House Bill 45, which we go back and look at the legislative service office stuff, is about $4.5 million a year to, in total, $3 million to schools and $1.5 million to local government. So this is the question on property tax. If we're going to give a reduction to the citizens of the state for property tax, can that local entity, can the schools then absorb that? Our county commissioners, the first year we had a raise, they reduced the mills in our county to try and compensate for that. But it's been suggested in the battles that we're really trying to figure out here is how do we make up for that if the counties and the schools can't absorb it. Once it's suggested, well, we ought to just go into the state savings and backfill that. I think that's the wrong approach. Savings would be a one-time funding. This needs to be ongoing. So then, what ideas possibly could there be out there? And you have to remember that the residential property tax is only about 30% of the overall property tax gathered. Industry pays through ad valorem and personal property tax for them about 60%. But yet when we're displacing those when we're displacing those resources that generate ad valorem because of federal intervention, not allowing us to have oil and gas leases, but moratorium on coal, those sorts of things, I think that's where if we could enhance and remove those restrictions and increase production of energy, you would more than cover the cost that we would have taken care of in that. Sorry, I went over.
Don't give it away yet. Do you have any insights into how? You only get 30 seconds.
So I'm really going to refrain from that. I just, one time I tried to speak for Becky, and it was just, well, it was just not right. And so it took a while, but I learned it. And I think that those then are questions. Take these questions, folks, and ask her that. Write her an email, call her, but ask her that. And I think that's why it's so important that she be here.
So it was House Bill 3, the homestead exemption with the 50% exemption if you are 65 or older. I actually brought that concept to the Revenue Committee, and I do support it. One of the things that I've heard a couple of times with this question was about the revenue shortfall. Good question, always relevant to property taxes. But specifically this exemption, the fiscal note was around $10 million, which is one of the reasons that I could support it. It seemed a reasonable amount, a reasonable reduction, if you will. And the concept came to me, it was actually a Fremont County landowner, and you hear this a lot with property taxes, but they said, at what point do you own your home, right? At what point do I not have to pay rent to the government? And that's certainly a critique, I guess, if you will, of property taxes. So hence this idea was born that if you've lived in Wyoming, paid taxes for, I originally brought it as 30 years, but 25 to 30 years, that you get that reduction. Another thing about it, we don't have an income attached with it. That might be something that we should add, but also people have to apply for it. So I do believe that it actually might even come in under that, because I don't think multimillionaires are going to go down to their county clerk and apply for their exemption to get 50% off their taxes. We'll see. But I felt like it was something in this broader discussion, and I do talk about it being a broader discussion about all these different pieces to reform property taxes, and how do you hit the people that need it the most. And of course, a lot of times we hear older on fixed income, and so this was a part of this bill was a part of trying to do that property tax reform.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to add
30 seconds. So I would just tell the folks here tonight that Erin served as Vice Chairman of Revenue. Her chairman, Steve Harshman, who's very able and just longest serving guy in the House, was really trying to figure out different approaches to property tax relief. He left her as Vice Chairman. She navigated all those property tax bills through the legislature. I am so proud of her for what she done. And she on property tax, things that we got done this year. Never.
Thank you, Larry.
The next question goes to you, and I flipped 2 and 3 because you aren't going to get the homestead one first, because it's yours. So what are two of the most important challenges facing the state of Wyoming, and how would you address these challenges? That's all.
The two issues that I would say that are most important facing the state, first is a struggle we're having with federal overreach right now, specifically with the administration for the last 4 years. We currently have 59 lawsuits that the state of Wyoming is funding and pursuing as far as making sure that we have our oil and gas companies can expand and do what they need to do. And coal still brings in a lot of money, folks. And if we could actually get it to market, it's much cleaner coal here than they're using in Asia. So we need to protect our energy and some energy industries that are still the lifeblood of Wyoming. So that's one issue. The second issue we've certainly in ways talked about already this evening, but I mentioned that we have real work to do when we go to the legislature, and we have what I would say I've called very non-serious legislators and issues that are constantly being brought to the forefront. And there has to be a recognition of what it is and what real work it is that we do. And so with that, we need to vote in people who will support Wyoming businesses, Wyoming energy, and again, understand the issues, understand the Wyoming issues, and focus on those. And I think this election for the Wyoming House and the Wyoming legislature in general is one of the most important.
Thank you. Lloyd, two most important challenges.
I agree with Amber, really, that the federal overreach thing is very significant, and the problem really comes back to the origin of the federal overreach. If these requirements coming down to the states were issues being passed by Congress's law, fine, that's implemented and that's followed, but they're being imposed by rule and regulation within agencies, they're being imposed through executive order. And you know, the ozone, the good neighbor requirement for that said if you are impacting downstream air by 1%, that then you're going to have to reduce that. And they wanted to suggest that Wyoming and Utah were doing that to the Front Range. Thank heavens for our Department of Environmental Quality, Air Quality, that had done the modeling and could defend in court our state implementation plan that proved that indeed we weren't, because it was going to require huge impacts on all of our industries. The same thing is true. Remember when we passed the sage grouse core habitat plan? Sally Jewell says, right on, Wyoming, you'll never have to do anything again. Well, here we are. Okay? And not by law, but by a rule change. Those are very challenges and very trouble. My second one will be healthcare, maybe we'll get to it later.
Lloyd, you can keep that in mind. Given our current system of taxation that funds our government and public programs, what do you believe should be taxed? Or what state services should be modified?
Ask it again, would you?
What do you think should be taxed? What should we be taxing? We're obviously taxing property. You know, you pay motor vehicle fees, you pay sales tax on something. What should we be taxing to bring in the revenue we need to run our government? Or should we be cutting services?
So what is it that the citizens of the state pay, in essence? And I think that's the question, that because we hear this property tax thing, and what we hear is that the state's getting all this property tax, and none of that comes to the state. The general operation of state government is really, the revenue source for that is from the minerals industry, the extractive industry, so that would include Trona, and sales tax, of which the mineral, the extractive industries pay about 40 to 50%. The challenge that we're having right now is that we're seeing the revenue side for the general fund being impacted because, and it's interesting because we all would like to see this uranium, the Natrium plant is really exciting, but it's going to use uranium, and the Naughton plant is shutting down, which use coal, which we generate revenue from. So we're displacing those traditional sources of revenue with wind, solar, and uranium. So I think the problem that we have here is our tax structure. Our tax base has some cracks in it, and we really, at some point, need to address that. I think that we have to, and we are right now looking at if we're going to use these various types of energy, wind, solar, nuclear, to generate electricity, we ought to have a taxation on them to where they're all on the same playing field. And they agree with that. They just want to know what it is we want to do.
You're not off the hook yet. So I heard you say that we should tax energy in the various forms. Is there anything else are you in favor of property taxes or against sales tax? What about all these other tax things? You don't mean just energy tax, right?
No, I think if you talk to industry, the struggle that industry has right now, industry doesn't like paying the taxes because they know that they're going to get a certain amount of services for those taxes. They don't want you diverting their taxes to pay somebody else's bill. So this idea that we backfill property tax and pay the rest of the general populations with their taxes, that makes them crazy. They don't like that. So the idea, I think property tax is important. And the reason it's important is because that's the type of taxation that we vote on. We want a sanitary district. We want community colleges. We want these special things that we get to vote on. If we fund it with general funds, I don't get to vote on those special taxes that property tax covers in Uinta County or Sweetwater County. But yet we're going to use general funds to cover that. It just seems out of whack.
Okay, thank you. Amber, what do you think we should be taxing to raise the funds we need to run our road?
Well, I mean, I think our current system of taxation is adequate, and it's how people pay taxes, really, in all the different states. We just have the extreme luxury of having a oil and gas and mineral industry that pay more than half of what we end up spending. But so we pay sales tax, obviously. Our sales tax is relatively low relative to other states. In addition to that, we have a lot of exemptions, and we pay sales tax on like significantly less services than other states. We tax something like 62 services, and they're like at 150 in South Dakota. We've seen a shift in the last 100 years. It used to be 70% goods and 30% services was the kind of the breakout of sales tax and how that was paid. And we've seen an actual flip in that. We're getting a lot more services now than we are buying goods. That's increased so significantly. And in Wyoming, we don't tax a lot of those. So there could be a discussion there for sales tax. But again, overall in Wyoming, we pay relatively low sales tax. Property tax, 47 in the country, as far as what we pay in property taxes. So even though, of course, we've seen an increase, we're still awfully low in property tax. We have no income tax, and we have no corporate tax. So everybody wants to always discuss taxes, and that's fair, and we should look at that. But I think to say that we need to restructure and we're paying too many taxes is overall not an accurate statement in Wyoming. I do think there's some western counties where property taxes, Park County, Teton County, have gone up in a manner that is unsustainable for them, and we need to address those. But again, in micro, in a thoughtful manner, not across the board.
Following through with spending money, do you support the current funding model for public schools? Why or why not?
I do support the current funding model for schools. I would say, I think everybody's aware, we spend a heck of a lot of money on K through 12. But at this juncture, at least, I think we're relatively roped in to the system that we have. The Supreme Court cases, starting with the Washakie case, I know Lloyd loves to talk about this. So the Washakie case, and then Campbell 1, 2, 3, 4, and the way it's been found, when we've made adjustments to those, it buys us another lawsuit, which is also where we're currently, that's something we're currently facing. But we do fund our schools. It is important. We use a model, we recalibrate every 5 years. You know, it certainly is a thoughtful model, something that has oversight from the legislature. We're trying to get it so it's fair and adequate and equal for students across the state, which is a good concept. I do look forward to possibly with another Supreme Court case, if there's a change, being able to dig in and maybe look at that and adjust a little bit better than we have been able to. But overall, we certainly, the funding model certainly makes it so we're adequately funding all of our schools, so that's a good thing.
Thank you. So Lloyd, she promised that you like this topic. So you get 90 seconds now, and then we'll have refreshments afterwards.
Ask me this question to you.
Oh, when you were all by yourself?
Yes, I
Because
was.
your counterpart didn't show up.
So, here's what I think, or how I feel about the funding. We have a funding, we go through and we adopt a funding model, and there's a legislative model, so this funding into the basket of goods, we approve of high, right, and it passes. So, if we pass the law, you have to fund it. And the problem we've had is that we get sticker shock for the Cadillac we bought, and we say, well, we're not gonna do the external cost adjustment because it's just too dang much, you know, and then that gets us in a bind. So if we don't like the car we bought, let's get something else. And I think that there really is an opportunity in the legislative model of this to make some improvement. And perhaps instead of driving a Cadillac, as I have said before, we could drive a Buick. Has butt warmer, has XM, gets us there, and we can do it. And an example that I would share with you is in the model. So the model is crafted to say with an average daily membership of X, you should have this level of staff. So many teachers, so many administrators, so many, whatever the case may be. And for that, we're going to provide funding for that number of teachers and their health insurance. Well, let's pretend that the model says this school, Christie's school, should have 100 teachers. But within the model, she has flexibility and she only hires 75. Okay? She's going to get funding for 100. And then we're paying health insurance for 100. Well, maybe we could only pay the health insurance for the 75 she actually has and save that 25. And I think that those still get their flexibility, and I think that there's a few of those changes that we could make that reduces that ongoing impact.
Thank you. Lloyd, do you have concerns about our voting and election process?
I do not.
What do you think, Amber?
Mine is basically the same answer. Just would go a little further. I know that both Lloyd and I, and probably everybody in this room, if you have any concerns, you know that you can talk to Julie Freese. She knows what she's doing. She's a long-term elected, and she understands the process. So truly, sometimes we don't understand well. I mean, what does happen with the ballots? So if you want to dig in, that information is there. It's known. It is proven. We have not had any issues with our elections in Fremont County or Wyoming. In fact, I know I went to a presentation that talked about how Wyoming computers could be hacked. We're not connected to the internet. So it's that type of misinformation that's getting out there, right? So if you go get the information is there, that our elections are secure, they're solid, they're run by solid people. We can trust our electeds, Julie Freese and everybody else. And so, no, we have a solid, secure system.
Thank you very much. So if any audience members have written down questions, hold the cards up and we'll come up. You already touched on this, Ember, and so has Lloyd, but we have a formal question. What is the appropriate balance between state and federal oversight of natural resources and lands in Wyoming, and why?
I don't know what you'd say the appropriate balance is, but I, as you said, we've discussed it. We seem to be having an issue, more of an issue right now, with that battle between federal power and management and state, and I support that pushback. We have more federal land in Wyoming than any other state, and there are issues that need to be managed, and need to be managed sometimes with the knowledge that we have on the ground here in Wyoming. Obviously there's bear and wolves that have been an issue. We've discussed at length oil and gas. So we need to work with our federal partners, and I don't think anybody is saying that we should not do that. But there's times where we have a lot of important knowledge and things that really are important and affect our state, and we need to have our voice, and we need to not just submit to their oversight, if you will. Sometimes we've got to push back, and I think we're good at doing it now in Wyoming. I don't think we have any problem standing up for what we believe in and sharing our knowledge. So with that, that's just part of governance, right? Is working on that balance.
In state government, one of the things that I really feel that I've been successful at is when industry or an individual comes to me and says, I have this problem with the Department of Environmental Quality, Department of Health, Department of Family Service, and then you get in and you start looking at it, and sometimes you just see this bureaucratic creep where an individual is looking at a rule or a law that may be a little ambiguous in their mind, and then make a personal interpretation of what that law should be, and then pass it on to you and say, that's the way it is. And they just can't do that. They shouldn't do that. That's, read it as it is. If we have to change the law, whatever we have to do, but you don't have the right to interpret that. And the challenge we're having with the balance of public lands is we're just seeing on the federal agency side so much of that interpretation of rule and imposing. A good example is the forest, the use of forest in the Black Hills. Wyoming's dissected by, I think, 6 regional forests. In the Black Hills, there's a requirement to have a stakeholder group to identify the amount of timber, harvestable timber. And they've just shoved that aside and said no, because they've got somebody that says, no, we don't need to do that anymore. Right, wrong, or otherwise, they just don't do that. And it makes me cranky. And that's the thing that we really have to, and the governor's done a great job. And so in pushing back against that type of federal bureaucratic creep, when they don't have the authority to do it.
Lloyd, you brought this up earlier when you were talking about the coal revenue part. Do you have any concerns about the Natrium nuclear power plant being built by TerraPower in Cameroon?
I do not, and I will say that qualifier. So the liquid sodium metal that we're using for the cooling is not new. If you go a few throws over the next couple of mountain ranges and you get to Idaho National Lab, they've got a similar reactor that's been in place since the 40s. It's been doing that. The thing that really makes this unique is the technology changes on the operating systems. That's really pretty cool. I'm really excited about this whole revitalization of the nuclear industry, because we've made so many advancements in the ability to generate clean energy. And the opportunity that Wyoming has now that is really gaining traction is the value-added industry, the manufacturing for those type the nuclear parts, because the existing industry is aged out. And you go to Ohio and those parts of the world that's aged out. And so we're actually, we've got the XW that does the naval reactors that is now engaged with Wyoming on 2 areas. We met with some folks. There's real interest in enriching and developing nuclear fuel. I think what that would do, he says, and yes, if we just use Wyoming uranium to do it all, but I think there's some real value-added industries that can come with this revitalization, but I am not concerned with natrium.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to sound very similar to Lloyd on this one. No, I don't have concerns, and I think it's fantastic. We'll get the uranium from Fremont County and Kimmer. Those are my two towns that I grew up in. So I think that this energy is it's clean. I think it's something that we're absolutely going to utilize in the future. I think Wyoming is leading the way. I think that's fantastic. I think this has a variety of ways that this is an opportunity for Wyoming. Some of the ways that Lloyd mentioned, expanding processing. There's uranium right here in Fremont County. We have a lot to learn and a lot to building that up, but we can do it. I think Wyoming can lead the way. Expanding processing, I think there's different types of industry. I think if we can be forward-thinking, I'm trying to, and really work on leading the way on this. This could have a lot of opportunities for Wyoming and for Fremont County. So I think it's great.
Keep the mic. How can the Wyoming legislature help to solve the problem of access to many healthcare services, including maternity healthcare?
So healthcare is a difficult issue. And certainly one, I think that government does have a role. And I've heard this question. So I heard about the specific maternity attachment to it. It was in 2023 that we passed, we got surprisingly a portion of Medicaid expansion passed, which was a postpartum, 12-month postpartum coverage. So actually we specifically dealt with that and worked on that and got it done in 2023. But we have, I think this is how it's said. We're not even rural healthcare. We're called frontier because we're too small. We're too small to be rural.
I think it's called a desert.
And that affects all of us, and it affects who we can bring into the state. And I think we all recognize that. And in Riverton, when we were working on the hospital issue, it was something like the average in Wyoming is something like 300% of the cost to deliver health care to rural people, and we were at 800%. And at some point, that's not sustainable. Hospitals need paid, doctors need paid, and we have to work on that. And so I think a really obvious answer is that I do support Medicaid expansion. We passed it historically in the House.
We're going to ask you about that.
Okay. In 2021, we did pass that, and so I certainly think that's a component.
So, I kind of live in this world in the legislature. The Department of Health is one of the agencies that I have in the Appropriations Committee, and so I visit with them on a regular basis. And I'll just clarify one little thing. The postpartum expansion we've done was for an existing Medicaid program that the state of Wyoming has had for a long time, not part of the Affordable Care Act medication or Medicaid expansion. It's a separate program, and we did expand the length of time for services on that. So when she says we expanded Medicaid, not in the traditional sense that we have probably will have a conversation on, I think Maggie, the challenge with healthcare really, as you pointed out, is that we're a frontier state. The second problem is us. We all want a hospital in our community. We want to have babies, we want to have heart surgery, we want to have something there for the minute we have a stroke. And it may only be in a town that has 2,000 people. And it's very difficult to have the volume of services based on that population to meet that. So then what's the role of the state? I think we need to be very careful, but we're having that conversation. But when we look for elective surgeries, which most of the hospitals use to sustain their operation and maintenance costs, well, we don't want to pay for that tonsillectomy here when we can go to Ogden and get it for a quarter of the cost. And so then how do we sustain the hospitals here? It is something that the state has a responsibility to have a conversation in, but how we do it, I think, yet needs to be defined.
Here's another health-related one. What is your understanding, Lloyd, and opinion about the extensive revamp of the mental health system and facilities supported by the state of Wyoming for mental health crisis support?
So I'm going to ask you to refine that just a little bit when you say revamp of mental health, because there's been several components of that. Is there one in particular that you're...
In these 90 seconds or 120 seconds, we can give you these huge questions. Tell us what,
Let me tackle.
we're dealing with Title 45, as you know, and the mental health issues and the expansion, state of Wyoming, Evanston, and up to Lander. What are your thoughts?
So what we really are attempting to do, and I think we are having, I would suggest that we're probably 5 to 10 years ahead in this process of other states that I've been visiting with, and that's defining what the role of the state is in providing mental health services to the citizens of the state. And the first thing we've done is we redone the campuses at the state hospital and the Life Resource Center. That's kind of the baseline. The next thing we've done, which was just went into implementation on July 1, was the behavioral health redesign. So we have community mental health providers around the state, and they were all in their own category, kind of doing their own thing, and we had this general fund appropriation to them, and there was no guidance on what that money really could be used. So it was kind of an open door policy, which sounds good, sliding fee scale, but the people that really needed help weren't getting the help. And so what we've done is we've created a priority population, and we've said to these folks, serve whoever you want to, collect insurance, collect Medicaid, collect sliding fee, or do it for free. But for the state general fund dollars, these are the people that we want you to see. These are the priorities. And that's keeping people out of prisons in the state hospital. That's taking these people that come out of prisons in the state hospital with mental illness and make sure that they have a warm place to go to when they come home. It's taking care of the people in our communities that have serious and persistent mental illness to make sure that they're not living under the bridge, that they're getting their medications, they have a place to stay. It's making sure that families who are in crisis and at risk of being torn apart stay together. So, and I could spend the next 3 hours and go through the rest, but ask me later.
No, thank you, and that's excellent, and that's exactly what's going on with this revamp, is trying to address those needs.
Yes.
And that you care about it is obvious. Amber, how do you feel about it? What are your thoughts?
I would just say, so then the next layer, that second layer, then the next layer is what the mental health task force is working on. Follow-up question.
So, I support it. So I guess what I'd say, and you can see it's a big part of the legislature, but Lloyd digs in and is a leader on many, many issues, and certainly this is where he's putting a lot of focus right now. And so my answer to that is that hasn't been in front of the legislature fully yet, and because Lloyd and heading this task force What I intend to do is learn from the information and the deep dive and the studies. When he says he can talk for 3 hours, I'm sure he's not kidding, right? Because he's digging in and doing the work, and that's part of the legislature and how it works. So what we will do is when they've gotten together all this information, and then have action items and different ways that we can do it, then I can work on supporting those at the action level. And of course, as I will, I'll just learn a lot from Lloyd and all the work that he's done and the task force has done. Again, task force and work is something that's a big part of the legislature. We've worked on Title 25 and judiciary. Didn't do a very good job, to be honest, as far as figuring out Title 25 is involuntary hospitalizations. So we have work to do there. We funded the 988 suicide hotline, and for the first time, this is a milestone for Wyoming, but we passed where we were not the #1 state in suicides. So maybe that's an auspicious sort of win, but it's a win, and we're working on it. We focus on it. I know it's important to the people of Wyoming.
Amber, how do we bring the division between the Freedom Caucus and the Wyoming Republican Caucus to productive governance?
So, what I would say about that is, from what I've seen from 4 years serving, is that I don't believe from them, meaning the Freedom Caucus, that there is a real focus on policy or governance or the budget. I don't think you can say that you stand for cutting 50% of property taxes, but you have no answer for where that revenue is going to come from or what you're going to cut. Or even more pointedly, that money doesn't go to the state. The most, from the Freedom Caucus, the thing I've heard most is that the state doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem. And they're saying that in relation to this 50% cut in property taxes, which shows that they don't even understand that property taxes don't go to the general fund. 0 of those dollars go to the state. So therefore, in my opinion, I disagree with the premise of the question, because I don't think it is other legislators' job to try to, ungridlock, if you will. If people are going to be willfully uninformed and continue with rhetoric like that, I don't know what the answer is for me to, if you will, as a member of the Wyoming Caucus, to break that from them. My answer to it is I think they should be voted out.
I'm not quite sure I understood what she was saying. Art of diplomacy. So, I would get down a little deeper into that and ask why we can't get there. And certainly we can vote them out. Why is that necessary? And I think in the legislature, been there 12 years now, and what I find is there's this territory with the House, between the House and the Senate. But if you have allies back and forth to get things done, there's this territory between the legislature and the executive branch. But if you kind of let the fence down and work with the executive branch, you can get stuff done, like I've done with the wildlife corridors and the federal funds being transparent. The legislature and the court, there's ground. The courts don't like it. Look what we've done with the Chief Justice and putting this diversion away from jail time to mental health treatment for people that have mental health into a misdemeanor. Working together, you just get some things done. The legislature, the reason we don't have term limits is because, and I'm glad we don't, is because that gives an opportunity for the agencies to rule. And you don't want that. but yet to work with the agencies you can get done. So who are you beholden to when you're working? Well, the Freedom Caucus is beholden to an organization that funds the State Freedom Caucus and tells them who and how to vote, and if you don't vote that way, then you can't play in their sandbox anymore. And I don't think we should be beholden, I don't think I should be beholden to an out-of-state organization on how I vote for things within the state of Wyoming. Now, that just is fundamental to me. That's, I think, the bottom, in my opinion, the bottom line. Their opinion may be different from that. That's my perspective.
I was supposed to ask you, in your opinion, what important differences between you and your opponent, but I think you already intimated that that's not really ground you want to cover, Lloyd.
It is, and so I'll just, let's take the information that she's put on her side, okay, conservative values, in on Facebook page, I support the right, she supports the right to life, she be fiscally responsible, small government, supports Second Amendment to religious freedoms. Fair enough, what Republican doesn't? And so I think the question that is fair to ask her is, that's a fundamental conservative Republican principles, all of that, but how are we going to do it? Where are we fiscally irresponsible? Where in government do we need to cut? And you can say everywhere, no, tell me where. And what religious freedoms don't we have? And what further Second Amendment rights do we need that we don't have? Identify that is the only thing that I have not heard from her right here, the general, but the details I think are, as you cast your vote, are probably some details that are worth further investigation.
Important differences between you and Joel Rubinus.
Thank you. So I think there's many very important differences between me and my opponent. We've talked about that he has publicly written and stated that he does not want to debate or therefore I feel like that includes represent people who don't align with his, quote, extremely conservative values. He also said he had the support of the sovereign people, capital S, capital P. I think if you do a little research on that, it's an extremist group of anti-government people, which I don't know why you'd want to run for government. If you're anti-government, let's just burning it down. And I'm a prosecutor and believe in law and order, and I support that. Again, I recognize that I am a Republican, but I represent and would discuss things with everyone. I have been a leader in my community and been involved in the Republican Party for a long time. I think that's something important. I do think one of the things that you see with some of these candidates are they come out of nowhere, they haven't been a leader, they haven't been involved, and then if they don't get elected, then they disappear, you don't see them again. I think the leader isn't just in the legislature, it's across the board, and I see and recognize a lot of leaders from Fremont County and in a variety of ways in this room, and you're interested and you're involved, and I think that's something that we need in the legislature. And I could go on probably several ways, but I will leave it at that.
So I'm going to ask that the audience questions be brought forward, and in the meantime, I have a question for y'all, and it's a brief one. We can start with you, Amber. Do you support the court ruling that the act of corner crossing, stepping from one piece of public land to another over a corner shared with private land, does not constitute trespassing?
So I respect Judge Scabell's written opinion on the issue. And I personally think that it's right, but I would also say that when you're looking at how the law works, it isn't actually that important what I personally think of it, because if the courts say that this is the state of the law, that is the law. At this point, so it went to federal district court. Judge Scavdall said, corner crossing, in fact, quote, corner crossing on foot in the checkerboard pattern of land ownership without physically contacting private land and without causing damage to private property does not constitute an unlawful trespass. I agree with that and I support it. In addition to that, then they expected an appeal, and indeed it was. They did oral arguments on that in front of the 10th Circuit. So the federal, our Court of Appeals, our circuit is the 10th Circuit here in Wyoming. They did oral arguments May 14th, so we're expecting a ruling on that. If I'm a betting woman, I would think they will uphold what Judge Scavdall held. But even if they didn't, then that's the state of the land, and then that's what I support. It does seem to me that with the checkerboard that we do have, that there's some fairness in finding a way to access it, but most importantly, legally, that's the finding.
So I get off in the weeds on healthcare and mental health, and Amber's shown where her strengths really are. And we rely on that when we have these judicial and these issues on in the importance that she helps us to understand the impacts of laws and what we support. So it's fun to listen to her. I support the corner crossing. I feel that this is appropriate, and I know my ag friends, that's caused a lot of angst. It's similar to me when we were doing pipeline work, and we'd be going across, we'd have a pipeline planned across all of this private land, state land, then you'd get and cross maybe 100 feet of federal land. And they say, these are the conditions in order to cross federal land, and they will apply to all of the other land as well, federal and state. We call it federal action. And it just used to and this kind of the same thing for me on the corner crossings. I respect that they don't want to trespass, but to keep somebody away from accessing other federal land when they're really not, or other state land to get there, I just think it's unreasonable, and I hope that all of this will be settled and that we can move in the next century accepting this.
Thank you, Lloyd. Here's an easy one for you, Lloyd. At what time, if state savings would go down, would a state income tax come into play?
Just say it again. At what time of what?
At what point would we need a state income tax? If state savings would go down, drop so low that we would not have a resource.
So you would have to be significantly more drastic than we currently are. And when you go down to Cheyenne and you see us old gray-haired guys and these cute women that are smarter than any of us gray-haired guys put together, and see what they're doing to help us negate and prevent the necessity of having an income tax, our rainy day account, legislative stabilization account, which everybody sometimes argues, says, what's that for? That was intended to get to one point where it would take care of the general fund needs of the state for 3 years. We're not there, but that's the intent. So when people ask, and you don't spend your savings to go to the county fair and ride the Ferris wheel only Cotton County, you save it for those drastic needs. And right now we have 349 days on that. But more importantly, as we hit a milestone this year, our permanent mineral trust fund is $10 billion. $10 million. The revenue that's generated off that in the common school fund, which hit $5 billion, is what saves us, because that's counting for 25% of our general fund revenue now. Those one-time dollars, you hear me talk about that, have been invested, working for us, so that we don't have to have a state income tax. That's the importance of saving and the power of saving, as you all know in your personal lives.
Thank you. Amber.
Thank you. So, you asked about when an income tax would pass in Wyoming, and so I asked you, is hell freezing over? Because I think that's when an income tax will pass in Wyoming. It's just not going to happen. There's no appetite for it. But the good news is that's fine. And I'll just go along with what Lloyd said. Like, it's really important to understand that there's something we can really, really be proud of in Wyoming. There has been historically and currently an investment and a saving strategy that it's complex, but it's so thoughtful, and we all take advantage of it now. We all rely on it now, but we're also saving for future generations. And so we've got those trust funds, they're inviolate, so we can't just decide to spend them. There's a reason for that, right? So the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund and the school fund, and we use that investment income. The third biggest payer of our bills is investment income. For a short time, my first year, COVID hit, and we had oil and gas dropped to zero. Investment income went up as our number one payer for a short time. Because there has been such thoughtful strategy, I don't know, Hathaway, there's just a multitude of ways that we've saved money and we use it. And we're taking minerals and we're taking resources from our state and we're saving for future generations as well. Because as we know, look what happened to coal. It has dropped. We still get money from coal, but it has dropped. And so we have a very, I'm just not quite getting the word, but we have a very profound, thoughtful savings and investment strategy in place that really has made us financially sound. And because of that, I don't see that Wyoming will have to have an income tax.
Okay, thank you. So there have been several good questions, and we're running a little over. We want to give you each an opportunity to make a closing statement, but I do want to ask one or two more. Why don't you take a step at this, Amber? When issues come before the state legislature that are actually national social issues, what are your thoughts on that?
So, thank you. I appreciate that question. I've talked about it, I think, in a couple different ways. But I do think that something's happening with social media, with national issues, whether you're watching Fox, CNN, or the like, that people are really focused on these national issues. And I get that, and they're interested in it. But when they start being, I'm just going to pick 50% of the bills or something that have to do with issues that really aren't something that's facing the state of Wyoming, I think it's really to our detriment. As I've said, we have real work to do, and the nuts and the bolts of running government really isn't that exciting, right? Doing budgets. This guy, oh my gosh, when they do budget hearings, they go over every single line, and they ask questions to every single agency, and they know every single dollar spent. That's the job. It's easy to get a cat fight over something that sounds, more fun to, social issue type thing. But the reality is, I think we're doing a disservice to our very duty of what we're supposed to do as the state of Wyoming when we go down to the legislature, and we have very limited time, and it becomes very limited resources, and we're focusing on the
Who's
wrong
using the
thing.
bathroom?
What's that?
Who's using the bathroom? Okay.
We're focusing on the wrong thing for a significant percentage of the time, and then we don't get to the real work, and it's very much to the detriment of the people of Wyoming, in my opinion.
It's I'm a long ways from this part of my life, but I just remember as a high school, small school in southern Utah, anybody would come out with the football team played because we just didn't have that many kids. And my hands are like two boards. I couldn't catch any other than a cold. I can't catch any. So I played the line. I was on the line, and our focus was to just move down the field 1 yard at a time. not the yard pass, not the great sweep around the end where you break through in the van and everybody goes crazy. The linemen just kind of had to do there. And I think the future of Wyoming is really, really exciting. In all my times, in my 6th term, I am more positive about the future of Wyoming, its economic future, than I ever have been. The potential is really, really exciting. We have to dot the I, cross the T, move the ball 1 yard at a time. Forget this nonsense in hoping that the head cheerleader is going to kiss you after the game.
We made some of the other Republican candidates, and Du Bois answered this question, so I'm going to answer it too, and you can do your closings. Since 2014, the Wyoming legislature has rejected Medicare expansion, which could provide health care for approximately 19,000 Wyoming citizens who earn up to 138% of the federal poverty level. For a family of 4, that's about $41,000 annually. Do you favor supporting Medicaid expansion? Why or why not?
I have not always. And this is really important because this is a topic that it's really important. We didn't, when it first came out, the Affordable Care Act was adopted. You give the federal government a lot of control over how you implemented things. We had 2 lawsuits take place. And we was always concerned that the feds would come in and then change the requirements. There's 2 lawsuits. The first one said, you'll recall, that it's a tax and it's legal. The Affordable Care Act is legal. Boom. And then the second one came out and says, you can't force the state, federal government, you can't force the states to expand Medicaid. We've not expanded Medicaid. So what that does, as Maggie pointed out, because in that whole Medicaid expansion, and we have now, you have an exchange to help people on various income levels get subsidies for their health insurance because it's very, very expensive. But that stops at about 150, maybe 200% of federal poverty level. So if you're really poor, you make too little, can't get any help. Does that make sense? You're saying, no, that doesn't make sense. That's the way it is, because the thought was you would expand Medicaid. Now, these are single mothers, a large part of them, whose children are covered automatically by Medicaid, but they're not because they're over the age of 21 and don't qualify, can't afford health care, employer doesn't provide it, and they can afford it. And so I do support that, because we've got about 19,000 in the state. There's this concern that it's going to expand to 50,000. Mathematically, it doesn't work. The Department of Health says it might expand to 20, 23,000. But here's the ironic thing. We passed a bill, House Bill 54, the governor vetoed it, that would have allowed a 50%, 25%, 50% reduction in our property tax because the people are hurting, right? The people in Teton County are hurting, where their second homes are worth how many millions, right? They're hurting. They need this, okay? $200 million is we would have taken out of the state general fund to cover that cost, okay? That would have funded Medicaid expansion for 2 decades.
Amber, thoughts?
So I don't have a lot to add to what Boyd just said. As I mentioned earlier, I do support Medicaid expansion. I do hear and listen to the concerns about that it's been estimated between 19 to 24,000 would sign up, and there's some concern it could end up being double or more than that. There's concerns about fraud. I don't think these are illegitimate issues, and so I support it cautiously, but I think that we have to get there and we have to support it, and then we have to implement it, and then we can work on glitches if there are any. But as we've already discussed, the difficulties with healthcare in our frontier, our rural areas that we live in is very real, and you can't just ignore that. And when costs are very high, somebody's going to pay them. And in order to address that, truly address that, I think this is a needed step for Wyoming, so that hospitals can get paid, so that doctors can get paid, and we can make sure that we've got a functioning, we'll go for functioning system of healthcare here in the state.
Thank you. If we could move on to closing statements, would you start us off, please, Lloyd?
Well, here we are. We're a month away from this election. Trying to contemplate what I should say to you tonight, and my thoughts go back to a guy that worked for John and I when we were in business. His name was Carl Royce. Just an incredible equipment operator. Carl was about my age, late 60s, getting close to 70. But when we really wanted this precision dirt work done, if we had a precarious excavation that needed to be dug, Carl got it done. And he just had those years of experience, knew how to avoid damaging equipment, knew how to make the most ditch in a day and get the job done. Now, we had other guys that could run equipment, and they needed to learn. Some days they were getting there. But when we wanted to get stuff done, Carl was the guy. When he was done with the blade, he didn't a dozer, he didn't need a motor grader. It was just that good. Well, I'm no Carl Royce, okay, but legislatively, I've got the time in the legislature that I think I understand the nuances that gets around falling into the pit holes and damaging and replowing the field twice, that I hope is of a benefit to you. The other thing that I'd share with you is, as much as I serve House District 54 later, is the work that I do for people outside my district, whether it's helping a family in Gillette get their son into a mental health facility, the folks out here in Willow Creek, who aren't in my district, but every winter don't have phone service, getting that rectified, or Eagles Hope, Amber and I are working to help get them some funding for these transitional beds that are critical in the state. So I ask you to vote. I hope that my time has been of value. I hope the things that I've done is value, and I ask for your vote on August 20th.
Thank you. Amber, please.
So, I guess just to sum it up, we've certainly discussed it this evening, but I'd start out by saying that I believe that we're seeing something different and something concerning as far as the direction in these legislative races happening. Obviously, first, the candidates being unwilling to show up or discuss ideas. As I've said, I am a Republican, and I will continue to vote along conservative lines, but there is not one person that I represent that I won't discuss policy with. And of course, I think that's at the very heart of a representative and democratic system. And also, as we've talked about, Lloyd and I both, and other legislators across the state have had very untruthful, false things said about us. And as Lloyd said, that's the biggest disservice there is to the voters. Because if you have to say that I take the opposite stance than the one I truly hold in order to get elected. I don't understand the point of that, first of all, and then just trying to get elected. But if you have to resort to that, I don't think you're fit to represent, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So with that, I pledge that I will listen to everyone. I will stand on my own record and my own knowledge, which is as a lifelong active Republican. And that I think I bring needed leadership and knowledge to the legislature. As I've said, as a prosecutor, as a lawyer, that's certainly an angle I bring to the Judiciary Committee as well as to the floor as a whole. And I look forward to continuing that. I would just say that serving in the legislature has been a real honor. And I look forward to doing it for 2 more years, and I will do my level best if I do continue to serve with honor. So with that, thank you all for being here, and if you're in Riverton, I would appreciate your vote on August 20th.
League of Women Voters of Wyoming, the Fremont County Republican Party, the Republican Women of Fremont County PAC, and the Fremont County Democratic Party, I want to thank these candidates for participating tonight and spending this time with us and in this election. It's humbling to hear how much you all care about and are invested in our community. Those of you who have come, please consider completing an electronic survey which can be accessed through the QR code at the table in the back. We're very interested in your feedback about this forum. We do these on a regular basis in a very nonpartisan manner, and we're very interested in hearing what we can do to improve this and to get the other candidates here. We hope that you'll join us on August 15th here at the Lander Library for the Lander City Council Ward number 1 forum. And right now we invite you to join us for light refreshments and an opportunity to meet and connect with Lloyd and Emma. Thank you very much.